Alright. Alright. Here. Let me just, Yes, I hear you. Come in. Meow. Yes. Yes, hello. Okay. What were we talking about? We were talking about, logic systems for building, for crafting, and for keeping. You had mentioned Warcraft, or I had, and so building blocks, building block logic system, quick flash of idea about how to organize such a thing. You have your character, you know, you have your objects, your stones, uh, your twigs, your leaves, your so on and so forth. So your little guy's got a backpack, and you can whip out your journal. Idea being is that you could either have some kind of an icon, because indeed, if I'm looking back in text, like in your main screen, you could have buttons up here to have something simulate your journal, and then use an actual, like, what was it, like notebook or something. You know, a button for it. There's lots of things you can represent in text to represent your figures. See, so now this is all just numbers instead of image. You have, these that you can represent. Uh, there's a code index for all of these. There's an exact way, smiling, and I can show you the list, but there's several of these emojis that you can use to organize, say, a table, that when you open up your book, and each of those numbers will link to those symbols. So that's a good way to. Those are all just digits, or it could simply be, um, numbers and words to represent those things. And since you have those things in your data, in your, I guess would be your HUD, So you're going to have a microchip somewhere in here to be your notebook where you're going to have all of your data. And it's going to stay and persist with you in every scene you go to, because you have one massive dream, but several scenes tied together with it, and so you're going to want your information to stay. I'm sure you know all of this, so forgive me if I'm just stating the obvious for you. So if I have several variables, because these are variables, each one oops. So I'm setting that to add one there, when it's powered on. And current value. This is a variable modifier, so let's go this way. I read left to right, at least in the way I was raised. So that's a good way to do that. So when that's powered on, it's going to activate and add a value to that doesn't need to be connected. It talks to it. And then to represent that number, since there's no way to see this, this is just data right now, active, happening in your map, but there's no way to represent it. And if I have a stone in the world somewhere, so let's get out of here. Stamp it. Big stone. Have it be movable for funsies. Let's throw a microchip on it. Keep all of our stone data, all of our stuff together, and we'll call this stone. It's not a metal ore, which we may have like a cube of metal ore or whatever, because when you mine, you might have different mines which have different stuff in it. You might be able to mine stuff on this mine, gold or whatever, just depending on what you're using in your world. Not to make it so complex, but you want to be able to make metals, so maybe iron ore, and smelting it over fire will give you ore chunks, and you can make more powerful hammers or axes, ones that won't break, ones that will have better damage and give you a leg up in your world. And then when you combine certain elements together, you can make even special weapons, and then you can find recipes to how to make these things, and so on and so forth. And that creative process is just limitless. But we have our stoned, yeah, and let's see here, microchip. Stone. I'm learning to label everything. Just keep your brain going and organized. Actually, I like organizing things, and I like logic, and sometimes this is a relaxing process, the art of organizing and logic, and finding out that system to that, and I'm getting better at it, and there's so much I have to learn, especially things I know I have to learn that I'm kind of avoiding, that I kind of reverse engineer and understand how to make specific functions, like this invert function with the signal manipulator, which I can get to work. I have to look back at tutorials. If I don't, I really just find a HUD, because I know that's how that works, that invert function, and I find that signal manipulator, snap it somewhere else, get rid of the other logic. I'm like, fine, now you're working. I just know, how to get it to work, but what's happening in each of the logic gadgets versus what I'm trying to get it to do sometimes confuses the hell out of me. but that's all a learning process, and so it will come. It will come. The more I invest that time in it, but as you can tell, I get distracted. So this stone, when it either we can use zones or we can use impact sensors. That's a movement sensor. Put that at hundo. Make sure it's sensing my friend. And I'm trying to avoid wires or anything like that, so we're going to be using wireless transmitters and receivers, okay? And why are we using variables? Well, in variables, you can persist them in dreams, you see? So that number is going to stay as you go from scene to scene. It's going to keep your variables with you. And so when you have your friend, because this is our friend, some of these things have, different ways of, like this one doesn't allow you to sense a target, for instance, which for some reason sometimes that the whole friend and possessed controller ways of detecting can sometimes bug out for me. Probably the way I'm doing it, but who knows, there are bugs. So to reinforce, to make sure that you're going to be detected, sometimes I do the zone, even double it up sometimes when it's pissing me off. But one or the other should work. Give it a little. Right for now, let's just be simple. So when I hit that, it's going to send a signal to acquire stone. Okay. And it's going to receive that signal. Got to name it. Acquire stone. Click in scene. So that way, I don't even know how to use these in zones exactly. I'm sure I could figure it out. I've never done it. I've always just done the in scene because it's sensing that communication and the whole. That's useful for like if you were in a zone specifically over here or whatever. It would only activate if you were using it in your zone. And that again, maybe the shovel digging mechanic. That would be a way to use that if you were to implement that. Just an idea, not that you have to use it. So that's going to power on when it's sending a signal, because I'm going to set this to power on only. So right now it's just sending a constant signal. Now they're actually talking to each other. Right now it's signaling a signal. It's not wired to do anything, but they're saying, hello, I'm signaling a signal, I'm rating a signal, I'm receiving it. We are talking now because we're on the same frequency, because we have the same name. So when I bump it, what am I going to do? Well, here's a quick little way of doing stuff to make stuff disappear and what have you. My way, it doesn't mean it's the right way, but I automatically know it works, so it works for me, is I always know I'm going to have a timer. I always know I'm going to have a destroyer to destroy my stone. I always know that that I'm probably going to emit something. I don't have to in this stone case, but in the case of projectiles, say if this was a projectile, which could easily be turned into one even with all this here, it would emit a flash if it hit a wall. But we don't need to do that because it's a rock. It's not going to do any kind of fancy stuff. It's just when we hit it. So when we bump it, it's going to start this timer, right? And then I like to have a little grace period. It could be 1.2 seconds to make sure when the current time is going to power that on. But when it ends, it's going to kill it. So I'm making sure even a fraction of a second that's going to receive some power. I know that mathematically before that's dead because I'm looking at it. I don't need to reset that or any of that timerness because it's going to die when I that stone. But as that is set up right now, that should give me a +1 in there. No way to represent it, but that can be done with a text displayer, or a, excuse me, number displayer, because we are displaying a number. Okay, now pretend this is in our journal. So we have a journal screen, a journal menu. You could craft a journal. You can simply make a binder. There are binders out there, you know, rectangles with a ring in it, where you physically opens up into the screen, and then you can flip the pages. You're now remote controlling it, and then attach each of these to the page in scene. So you put it in scene on the paper pages of your journal, and you can flip it with, say, your left and right, and now you have a journal that you can flip and have organize your pages, your survival guides. You can paint your words on your pages, like handwritten, or you can use the text, like they have the text handwriting, and that's a cool little mechanic journal thing that you could use. Maybe your main touch button opens it up, and it just kind of, maybe you have an animation where your character reaches into his backpack, and then you see the journal, and then it kind of comes to the foreground of the screen, and now you're able to flip it. However you want to do that mechanic, but now you have a whole page to put all your numbers in. And right now this is just rocks, and I want to say rocks. Okay, I have a menu right now that on my phone, actually, for I have this saved for a quick reference for my gadget, for the emoticons. There's two ways of using the emoticons. There's emoticons ways, and then there's the in Dreams way. So Dreams has emojis that you use with the tags, and then there's the emoticons that you use with the colons. So there's two different ways you can input those images, like the skulls, or I think you use the camera aperture thing in your crafting system. The way, I love the way you did that. I have no idea how you did that. I kind of see how you did that in my brain, but that I really love that. When I saw that, I was like, that's so freaking cool, man. You came out with that. You know, that's sweet. That's a great way to kind of, you know, toggle your stuff, you know. But anyway, so there is an emoticon for I'm fiddling with my phone, and let me stop doing that, to look for the rock. But let's see if there is a rock. Say if there isn't, there's probably something that looks like a rock or trees or that you can use. But let's just not bother to find the emoticon. Let's just say the word trees. Text. Not that you don't understand the whole concept at this point, what I'm doing, but keep them both open so you can see them and play with them while you're doing it. See? Keep them both open and you can play with them all you want. You can get rid of the border so that they merge into one seamless if you wanted to. You know, together in the shadows and whatever you want to do on your page. This kind of looks like papery stuff, and then you can play with your textures too to simulate your paper kind of, maybe, you know, in there. However you want to do that in your journal. But for now, I'm saying trees. This was a rock. Yeah, but you get the point. It's anything. It's anything. It's your trees. It's your rocks. They're just numbers. At this point, there's just variables, and you don't even have to have sculpts to do that. And so let's hope this works. It did not. It totally did not. But let's go back and see why it didn't work. What did I do wrong? Probably because I did that. That's something I do ass backwards too. Instead of the power, it's going to send the signal. Chirp. Still didn't do it. No, we'll get it to work. Don't you worry that. Let's put all of them in. All the bumps and the touches and the. I'm a friend. It's gonna send that signal. Currently, I mean, I'm doing that so it does it right away. If I do it that way, it's going to send that signal the entire time that that's powered, so it may not count for one. So I'm trying to get it to only one, but let's crank up this time a little bit more and see, just make sure. I didn't plug this into anything. See? That's why it wouldn't work now. So it's going to power up that when it's powered on. Still ain't there. That's okay. Stone. Stone. +1 when powered on. Powered on when signal active. Number displayer is not plugged in to anything. Current value. Okay, so we see it's talking, but that's because I probably have all those bumps plugged in like I did. So it's going, not only is it going once, it's going, you can use a counter to ensure it only happens once. But it's rolling, scraping, doing all those things. So maybe just one bump will do, now that we know all that's plugged in. If we actually hit it. Well, let's use a counter. So all that stuff that we did with the bumps, let's just use a counter. Sometimes it's like checks and balances, and see, there could be better ways to do this, but this is what I do. I'm like, okay, it's working. Now how do I refine? And I temper it with my logical hammer. It's more like a rubber brain than really a steel one, but it'll at least get there. You know, it'll do something. But counter. One time is going to make this happen, and the bump is going to put an increased count. So it's not going to go beyond one. Ooh yeah. Oh. So that's starting from scratch, just our rock now. We could have when we bumped it, or when we were in our zone, when that signal now is sending to our puppet. This is where we could put her in our animation if we wanted to, and see how like that animation is separate now from our individual thing. But this can trigger animation too, to pick up wherever that is. Now he's going to go and pick it up. And let's just do a little example of animation. You know how to animate. But initial keyframe, bam, bam, bam. Let's reach him down to pull him by the butt. That's how he kind of does this thing. You know, like that. And then maybe he'll reach his. Gotta go in a little. Get your leg kicking out, boy. Let's go back. There we go. That is not what we want. That's that's not really the thing we're trying to achieve. Again, we fumble until we get it set. But let's just crank down and do this and do that. Kind of maybe bend over and look down at what we're doing. And we're picking something up. Maybe a little bit. That. Uh, 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 uh. Yeah, I think that is good enough for demonstration. But for we can get him to do his thing in a way that looks human and right. And I don't want to waste too much time right now, just doing stuff I ain't gonna save. So when that goes powered on, do once. It's gonna do it once. It should work now as it is. And of course you could smooth that out. And so that's that as far as that goes. But if you had, say, a tree, like a tree real quick, I guess. Your tree. It's an ugly ass tree here. Okay, so you have a tree, right? Just for trying too hard, but right. Come in there. Let's give it some. Can we just pretend that there's leaves on it, or whatever? Why we have to do this? I do have to work soon. Let's see. So let's pretend there's leaves and all that kind of stuff on there, and so you have your apples growing. Same principle. You're going to want to have your microchip on this for all the actions that's going to happen with this, and you're going to have, depending on how many actions you have with this. I think as far as apples go, chopping, you give it a little animation to kind of shake. You can even put like connectors at these points, so that way you could wobble them. At the tree, put little connectors at the tree branches so that you can able to give them slight wobbles and animate your trees that way if you wanted to. Kind of think of trees as being alive and almost like puppets. So when you chop, it kind of moves and then it'll drop some apples for you, which can, when they hit the ground, once they hit the ground, those apples, they will rot. Or however you want to do that. I mean, so same thing. Making sure that you're not just having wires everywhere, but you're using these guys, getting these guys to talk to them. And so you have your initial trees that could give you health, but if you want lumber, and that's regenerative health, as long as you keep this guy alive, but you're going to need shelter at some point. So if you want to use a health manager to represent your damage or number of chops, that's all dependent on how you want to organize your logical system, because you can put numbers to represent your power of your particular axe. Maybe you have different kind of trees. Maybe they take more chops. Maybe you have a tree that has a hollow in it, and on occasion, and there's some bees that'll come out if on a chance, on a randomizer, So not only can you get health out of a tree, but it can hurt you, and which would really, it gives you an extra kind of like a survival kind of thing. Like, you just never know what's coming out of the wild, man. and but you know how to already. You know how to simulate number of chops to execute and make this broken. So you'd have this tree, and if you want to chop it down instead of just having it, over parts of it could be broken when it's fallen. Which is actually I like your way. I like your way of having a different. Maybe some of them are twigs, and maybe the main part of it is a trunk, and you can completely destroy that object, or you can leave it in the ground and have a stump cut this in half. I think destroying the object is best as far as the budget. I think that the way you're going about it is fantastic. So one tree is going to give you maybe leaves, maybe uh, why wouldn't it? Maybe a few apples. Maybe they're only temporary; they won't grow back. Neither will uh, whatever you want that to come out of the tree, and then maybe even if there was bees and they pissed you off enough and you ward through it, you can get some honey or something out of that. There's more than apples. You've got honey now. You can have a honeycomb, which is extra boosts of stamina or whatever, extra rewarding or whatever. Um, anyway, I'm hoping all this is making a little more sense, because now this is tree, and then you can put that in your organized journal on your microchip along with your wherever that went in your notebook, which you can drag out. You can have another microchip having all your animations linked to um, each one of those things, and then making sure that each one of your tools, should you craft them, it's obviously in your hand already, but just like not powered on, and then it powers on when you combine your stones. And so you'll have a button, obviously you've already worked that out for using stuff, and those are all numbers, and that's all math, and you'll have all your pluses and minuses and all your however many stuff you have, and you'll have a whole list of it in your journal that you could resort to. And that also cleans up your gameplay, because you don't have all this stuff looking at you. Some of it you want, but if you have a lot of stuff, you don't want to be looking at all that stuff in your game. You want a journal. So I just hit the touchpad and look at it real quick if I want to, and then organize it that way, and however you want to organize it. And I maybe this wasn't helpful up to this point, or maybe it was, to see what I was talking about. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to toss them up, because I really don't know where to go from here with the limited amount of time that I have, as far, or if I have touched on or answered anything for you to clarify. Um, just let me know. We could do this again. We can get more into it. Uh, but this is where you're going to have all your information, and then combining things is going to be all about, you've already done it, and gates, and using those numbers together, and then probably a calculator. I'd really have to sit and figure out that, because I've never done it, to be honest with you. I've never done it. We can just sit and figure out it together sometime, or individually, and spiral it from there. But organizing your data is going to save you a lot of time in the end for all the things you want to do. And then so making fire, so you're going to have your torch, or whatever's in your hand, your axe that you now have, because you've got those numbers, acquired it, and it's going to activate and power on that tool now that's already in your hand whenever you want to select it, your torch, whatever it is. So you have your sticks, and you have your stick, and grasses, or whatever that would make the torch, and the reeds, say reeds, or whatever you want to use, to bind it, that equals the torch. And your method of making fire, how do you make fire? Well, You got to have grass. You got to have sparks. So, I think the a good way to I think as far as torches go, you can make a torch, but you got to stick it in an already lit fire to get it lit. You know what I mean? Unless you have, say, your character with your backpack maybe already had a lighter in it. Maybe it's got a limited amount of fuel. Maybe you have matches, so you can start off that way. Maybe you get two sticks and over leaves and you're able to make fire. So as long as you got your torch and then two sticks and leaves, you're able to make a temporary fire and then light your torch. And maybe this burns up quickly, but for some reason your torch doesn't. Maybe even to make a torch, you have to have some kind of a fuel on it that makes it burn longer. Um, so it just depends on. And assuming that if you're in a mine, you're going to want a light source, so you're not going to be able to mine metals or more advanced things unless you keep that torch going. So it really keeps you questing for these items to survive and get better. Um, that's going back to what you were doing, and as far as Warcraft goes, then that's all very doable. As far as an overhead kind of a thing like that, you got your peons. You point and click, over here. You're kind of like fog, open up kind of a thing. You have your little blocks of forest, so they'll chop at it, chop, chop, and then over a long period of time it destroys, and then they automatically carry it back to your base, and then you get your numbers, you know, and then you're able to use those to craft. Okay, now I have all those numbers, so I'm able to make this grid here a block of my barracks, and my barracks is now going to pump out some more this or whatever. That's a Warcraft game that is completely doable. Uh, but then it's all just numbers. It's all numbers, destroyers. So it's completely doable. And your world can be as big as you want it to be because it really just can be. You can make them in scenes, you know. Maybe you're starting off in a more foresty area, you enter into a cave area here, and the next thing you know you're in a whole new scene with unlimited amount of memory and different sculpts, and in those worlds you can keep those sculpts but then represent them by numbers or the words here or emoticons, so they don't have to be sculpts that are persisting. Your tools will persist, the ones you have in your hand. Your animations will persist with you, the ones that you have in your puppet. But all the different things don't need be. That those are in their own scenes, but they're all still with you in number. And you're going to keep it. I hope any of this is making sense. Again, I haven't done this yet. I've just been playing around with I get brainstorms of what you can do. Time is always a factor. As it is now, I'm going to have to get jetting. We can hang out anytime you want. Otherwise, being that I'm here and reasonable, of course, duh. Anyway, Dylan, if that's you, it's cool. I love seeing what you're doing. You got an awesome vision and ability. So I hope I'm helping. If I'm not, sorry. Just, I'll keep this video up and quick save this for whatever reason if we want to refer back to it. Whatever. Maybe not. I mean, we could start this from scratch or keep going on this idea and show it. This could be our little scene for or talking about stuff or whatever if you want. Whatever. But I got a jet, man. It's nice talking with you, at least on the Facebook. Sorry if I delete stuff. I realize that I delete other people's comments, but I try not to flood the forums, I guess, because I see my name up there too much. I'm like, dude, no. And so I delete stuff. And anyway, later, dude.